What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. My name is James St. Michael. If you're new to the channel and you want free instrumentals, free beats, tips and tricks on how to better produce and write better songs, please do consider hitting that subscribe button down below. Nonetheless, we're gonna go ahead and get straight into it today. Let's go. So today we're gonna talk about mastering. Basically, for anyone who doesn't know too much about it, it's basically the final polish on a track that's already been mixed. Now, when it comes to mastering, a lot of people get it confused with the idea of just making louder, and that's not the case at all. While getting it louder is the biggest, probably the most noticeable highlight of mastering, there's a lot more to it. There is enhancing certain harmonics, there is removing other, unnecessary rumbly harmonics throughout the whole track as a whole. But basically, we're gonna go through this and we're gonna try and get a foundational understanding of what mastering is and how to best approach it. Now, by all means, if you can go out and get yourself a professional mastering engineer to master your tracks, that is the best route to go, of course, but they're kind of expensive sometimes, and you don't always want to spend $600 a song to get it done or anything around there, which is what this video is all about. Basically, I'm going to try and help give you a foundational understanding of what you can do on your own to try and get your songs sounding more polished, refined, cleaner, and of course louder, so you're more competitive commercially on the radio and streaming platforms. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look into this. Now, I've got this project loaded up here in Ableton. It's basically a hip-hop beat called Wandering that's going to be going on to the website later tonight. So if you want to check it out there, that'd be awesome. But this thing is pretty decently well balanced already as far as mixing goes. Everything's been image processed out already, so we're not going to focus on the mixing part of it. What I did was I bounced it out and I brought it into Logic. But before I did that, the important thing is that you come over here to the mixer of your DAW. Ableton doesn't really have a mixer, but this is one way I can see a readout. If you can see right here, the track was coming in at a high of about -3.14 decibels. Now, before your track goes to mastering, you want to make sure that it's hitting somewhere between -3 to -6, so that way you have the extra headroom where you can afford to play around with in your mastering phase of your production and get that track louder. If you're already coming in at 0 and you're trying to throw a track in where you're already clipping at 0 or even surpassing 0, once you try to master and throw on some compressors and limiters, especially the limiter, you will be screwed. Do not do it. It's not gonna work. Always give yourself at least -3 to -6 decibels of headroom space. So this track has already been bounced out. I'm gonna go ahead and show you in Logic now, my preferred mastering suite and DAW, and this is the project right here. So now that we're in the DAW that we're gonna be using for mastering, we're going to select the loudest part. When you're mastering, you always want to work with the loudest part because that's the high point of your track. And if your high point is the loudest safely, we can then assume that everything below it is going to be decent too. If you start mixing to make your softest parts louder, remember, we're working on the whole track, which means your loud parts would then be extremely loud and more than often than not clipping and distorting. We don't want that, so always work in the loudest parts. I've got the loud part here selected, the hook, and I'm going to go ahead and just loop that. This is a template that I use. Basically, it starts off with the Pro Q2. I got an SSL compressor, a multipressor from Logic, and a limiter. Now, this is just a foundational starting point. We're gonna probably add more stuff as we go through. Let's go ahead and take a listen now. So if you can see right here in the meter on the left and the stereo out, we actually have the decibels, they're coming in at -3 to -6, which is what we wanted. That's good, we want it there. As you can see on the track itself, the actual track with the audio file itself doesn't have any plugins on it. I don't put any plugins on there. What we want to do is put all our tracks on the stereo out channel right there. So this channel is the one with all the plugins on there. That's where we're going to be doing our mastering work. So now what we're gonna do is just bring in the Pro Q2. Basically, you wanna first cut out that rumble. That rumble is just, it's not bad, but it can be horrendous if you have the wrong kind of frequencies in there. So I do a low cut to about 20 to 25 hertz, around 30 typically, and we're gonna go ahead and take that out and back in. This is gonna be a very subtle and probably not even noticeable difference, but on different bigger monitoring systems, it would be noticeable. you listen to that, you may think that it lost some power in the low end. And while that is true in some scenarios, we actually took out a lot of dirt and mud that covers the rest of the track. So that's why we gotta be very delicate with this. All your moves in mastering have to be very, very thought out. You always have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is this doing for the record? With every single move that you do. With this, I just cut out about 30 because I wanted to get the mud out of the whole record. I may have lost a little bit of power, but we'll get that back with compression. Now next up, we are going to look at the SSLG compressor. This already has what I call, not what I call, but what the world calls glue compression setting on there. So basically we have a low ratio, we have a high attack, slow release, and a threshold set to around 4, but the makeup gain is going to be 4. Now the most important part when you use some sort of compressor or bus compression, especially like glue compression, you don't want this little needle here to hit beyond 4. You want it to stay below 4. If you start going beyond 4, things start to get a little too muddy again. So we're going to hear it without and with. Now sometimes this doesn't work. Sometimes glue compression isn't the route to go. It's all experimental, but we're going to hear it with it and without. That's a big difference right there. So glue compression is going to really work on this one. I don't know if you can hear it, but that was a pretty darn big difference. I'll play it again without and then I'll add it in. Really just levels everything up and it practically grabs the whole track, raises it, and also adds this sort of shimmer to it, which is really, really nice. I'm a big fan of the Waves SSL compressor plugin. So that's the first stage of compression that I use. The second is going to be a multipressor. Now this is a trick that I actually grabbed from I'm a Music Mogul, and I had no idea that Logic had a preset that was this universally great. But we'll load that up here, and it's the Punchy Drums preset. So what I do is I'll go ahead and I'll play it with it off, and then we'll turn it on so we can see if there's a noticeable difference. That was pretty damn good. That was good. So for anyone who doesn't know what the multipressor is, it's a multi-band compressor. Now you don't have to use the multipressor. You can use any form of a multi-band compressor. Isotope has a great one. My favorite one is Fabfilter's Pro MB. I just use the multipressor because this Punchy Drums always is a great starting point for the record. And as you can hear, what this basically did was it adds 4 compressors within one plugin, and you can change where you want these compressors to, what frequencies you want them to act on. So the bottom one is acting from 20 hertz all the way to around 150 hertz. Now this is where we got a lot of that low end back. We used the multipressor to give some more gain to the low end to bring back what was cut off. But if you notice, we're not getting anything below 30 because we cut that off. We're just getting everything 30 and above enhanced, so we get more power and more presence back in the low end. Now we're gonna go on to the next part. So with the limiter here, this is probably the most important part of your track. It's what's going to help you get more gain, but I don't really like to use a limiter for more gain. I use the compressors for that. What I use this limiter for here is to monitor just where exactly this track is sitting at commercially. Now for streaming platforms, you're gonna have around 14 LUFS, negative 14 LUFS. That's the max that you want your track to hit or average around, because streaming platforms cap out at negative 14 LUFS. There's a free one actually here, a free limiter, or I'm sorry, not a limiter, it's a metering plugin that allows you to see where your track is at in LUFS. And that one is the YouLean Loudness Meter 2. If you don't have Fabfilter Pro L-2, you can use this and it'll show you your loudness range, it'll show you your integrated and short term of your LUFS. These are all very, very, very important, and it works really, really good. If I didn't have the Pro L-2, I swear I would be using this one. We have momentary, which is the instant moment of how loud your track is. We have short term, where it takes an average of a short range of audio, basically like the first 3 seconds prior to what you're hearing and the next 3 of what you're hearing. And then we've also got the integrated, where it takes the average of everything you've heard so far, and these are all basically just readings of the loudness of your track in the LUF format. So let's take a listen. So as you can see right here, I have a -16 short-term average. Now if I go into momentary, we'll see exact meterings in the exact moment. Somewhere between 15 and 17. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to momentary, and I'm gonna actually start giving it some gain because I can afford it. Now I have about 2 decibels of gain. I can afford the track before we hit that 14. And keep in mind, we can go a little past 14 just as long as the average stays around 14. So we'll go into integrated. So that actually came out pretty good. We still have about 15.2 integrated, so I'm gonna give it a little bit more actually. I'm gonna go about 9 more, 0.9 more. That's pretty darn good. I see some pretty big clips here, -2.5, so I'm gonna hold it there. I don't wanna push it too much or else we'll get clips of distortion and the bounce out. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and close the limiter, and I'm going to start adding some enhancements. Basically, I want this thing to get more crispier. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my OneKnobs and I'm gonna load up a brighter. This is kind of a lazy way of doing it, but the brighter is basically an exciter by waves. So you're gonna hear it with 0, and then we're gonna slowly start to add more, and I'll A/B with and without. So I went ahead and I added a little bit more, and I wanted to push it more. Problem though is that those hi-hats, as much as I wanted them present in the mix, now we're having a problem where the brighter is starting to pick them up and enhance them almost too much. So I'm stuck with the kind of crossroads here. I can either go back to the mix and bring those hi-hats down where I can afford to bring more brightness out of the overall track, or I can keep this subtle on the brighter and leave the hi-hats with the presence and just keep them a little bit crispier and the overall track just a little bit crispier. For the sake of time, I'm gonna just go ahead and go this route because there's another trick we can use to kind of enhance the whole track, and it's what I was going to use to bring out that extra little bit of gain that we could afford from when we were using the limiter, and that is saturation. I encourage you to use saturation in your masters because saturation really does give a sort of presence in a warmth way to your overall track. Depth is something we're going to achieve in a little bit, but presence we're going to go about with saturation right now through an idea of warmth. So SoundToys, my favorite saturator is Decapitator by SoundToys, and we're going to load that up here. I have a preset down for about 20% mix. I like starting there, so let's go ahead and play this. That's really freaking good. So basically, Decapitator is a saturator by SoundToys, and it has 5 modes, 5 different analog style circuits. It's got a drive, it's got a punish feature that just destroys and is disrespectful to your tracks, trust me. But this thing essentially just adds warmth, and if you didn't hear it then, I'll A/B it so you can hear it with and without. It just comes to life, like it just breathes life into your track if you use a saturator, and in this particular instance, Decapitator is just incredible. I know a lot of engineers who use this, and a lot of producers who use this. I swear it's my favorite saturator. So you don't have to use Decapitator. Your plugins, I'm sure, your DAWs have good ones. I know Ableton's got the saturator. Logic's got the overdrive and distortion. You can use those as well. Fabfilter's got a great one called Saturn. Waves has got so many. Isotope has got trash. So by all means, just experiment with your saturation. Now, one of the last things I'm going to add to this is going to be image processing. I want to basically use image processing to see if I can create more depth and space within the track. I have two favorites, Isotope's Imager and the Directional Mixer is one of my all-time favorites. It's probably one of my favorite plugins in Logic, period. Now, this doesn't always work on the master, but we're going to experiment to see if it works. Now, it's very subtle, but it is in there. It is doing a part where it's kind of taking this audio spectrum and it feels like it's doing this with it. It's expanding it to let the sound open up more. Very subtle, but remember, mastering is all about subtlety. Subtle moves make big differences in the end. So we're gonna go ahead and keep that there. And the last thing I'm gonna add is one more limiter, just so I can keep everything that has happened after the first limiter from clipping into too much. So I'm gonna add one more limiter. We'll go into Fabfilter Pro L-2. These right here, -1.9 and all that, where we were averaging -13.7 and -13.9, those are gonna work fine. So I'd say that we've got this pretty much set up just right. The mastering, I'd say, is pretty good now. So we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna A/B the track now, mastered without everything and then with everything. That's it. I'd say it's pretty darn better. It's a lot better. If you can hear the difference and you can feel it and you're not hitting above 0 right here. If you notice on the stereo out, we never pass 0.0 on that fader. We are pretty darn good. I'd say that we did our job well. So that's it, guys. That's a basic fundamental approach to mastering. So I want to thank you guys for your time and checking this out. I do apologize if it was a bit lengthy, but I wanted to make sure that I covered a lot of ground with y'all. I know this wasn't very in-depth, but I hope it was able to assist you guys with mastering your own tracks if you're thinking about going that route, because it is definitely possible. Now, I want you guys to please let me know in the comment section down below what plugins y'all are using to mix and master, because I want to know what you guys are using just as much as you guys might want to know what I'm using. This is all a learning process, and I can't wait to continue learning with y'all. So with that said, I hope y'all can please hit that red subscribe button so we can continue growing and learning together with each other. Until next time, good vibes.